Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about Rudy Giuliani held in contempt twice by Judge Lewis Liman with dire consequences for his efforts to keep possession of his Palm Beach condo in his ongoing, by now very prolonged, battle against the two Georgia election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, whom he defamed. Hard to know how far back to rewind the tape here, but let me at least focus a bit on the hearing that started last Friday and continued today. So after Giuliani long since held liable to Freeman and Moss for an amount over $150 million that we know he can't possibly pay, and long after a series of different attempts to bob and weave and hide, including filing bankruptcy and withdrawing that filing, was really at the nub of it with Judge Lewis Liman. Liman is an excellent judge. I've talked about him before. I clerked with him. He's very solid, and that means, in his case, and often for good judges, slow to draw the line, but once you draw it, you will stay with it. So there's always the question of when will a judge, exasperated enough by a litigant's failure to comply, say, next time, Mr. Litigant, that's it for you. Because at that point, a good judge has to follow through, and that is what Liman did. But it was a tricky position, and let me explain why. Giuliani has again and again failed to comply, partial compliance. Here's my Mercedes. Oops, I don't have the title to it. Oops, my Joe DiMaggio prize possession jersey has been lost. I'm trying to find where it is. Oops, all these possessions that were in my apartment have been moved. A lot of crap like that. And at the same time, and this has been a continual theme going way back, complete failure to comply with discovery orders from judges to produce information to Moss and Freeman that they can use to try to press their claim of, he needs to give us this, he needs to give us that, he said that this is over there, that that's over there. So the information they need for the very efforts that he is resisting. So finally we reached a point where Liman said, that's enough. We're going to have a hearing now. That's the final step. Show cause why you should not be held in contempt, Rudy Giuliani. And that started last Friday. Giuliani tried to get out of going to New York. He wasn't feeling well, this and that. However, he had just done his podcast and made other appearances. Liman didn't go for it, said, nope, I'll see you in court. And he was. He took the stand, moreover, and he had to because he was trying to rely on declarations he's made about how he has complied or excuses for not. That means the Moss and Freeman had a right to cross-examine him, which they did. It went to the end of the day Friday, and he had been on the stand and not very persuasive. And then it continued into today, Monday, with Liman permitting him to have gone home and have the second part of his examination be by Zoom with him down in Florida. Now, there are two basic claims for contempt here, and Liman held him in contempt on both. The first are two specific interrogatories, numbers 4 and 8, where Moss and Freeman say, give us the name of your doctor. Give us your different communications with different care providers, etc., because that is information they can use to try to say in a trial that is coming up, sort of Giuliani's last stand, your Palm Beach condo isn't your primary residence. The law in Florida that will apply here says you can maybe shield your primary residence, but we won't just take the say-so of the person who says it's theirs. you're really going to have to show it and look at extrinsic evidence. Giuliani was refusing to provide that. So that's where Liman both held him in contempt and imposed sanctions, as I'll explain in a moment. Second, Giuliani has a whole list of non-compliance with all this property he's supposed to turn over, and we were at the point right there where Liman was saying, show cause why you shouldn't be held in contempt. Okay, back to the first point. On those interrogatories, Liman said, you're in contempt. And the difficulty for Liman, and I've spoken about this before, is Giuliani looks really, completely, in an indefensible position. He's been so recalcitrant, so tricky, so bobbing and weaving, so evasive. Liman said, you're at the end of your rope, and now show us why you won't be held in contempt. And if Giuliani didn't really come up with something good, what could Liman do to enforce compliance? Because that's the point of civil contempt. It's not to assess a punishment. It's to make you comply. And the obvious choices are two. Money, big fines. You've seen that happen with Trump before, and they increase until you comply and you don't get them back. But Giuliani doesn't have two nickels to rub together. He's been stiffing his lawyers. He's, completely without funds. It would be blood from a stone. Or you put him in jail, and we've seen that happen before. And in that circumstance, it's said that the contemnor has the keys to the jail cell. He just has to comply with the orders, and then he would get out. But man, oh man, 80 years old, a former eminent official in New York, putting him in Rikers, pretty tough stuff. So Liman himself was sort of on the horns of a dilemma. He solved that by not putting him in jail. And so in the first instance, he has said for the violations that he's in contempt for, not answering the interrogatories, he is going to not permit Giuliani to make certain arguments at the trial that's coming up over the Palm Beach condo. That's actually coming up a week from today. And guess who is the fact finder in that case? Judge Lewis Liman. It's a bench trial. So it as much as tells Giuliani that his final last stand that he was trying to still contest, even as he's completely surrendered or just evaded on everything else. His one last claim of, but I get to keep my Palm Beach condo because it's my primary residence. That, of course, is a factual question. He had this lavish pad in New York that now is going to be sold to pay for Moss and Freeman, and New York doesn't have the same kind of law Florida does. So now, to me, based on what Lyman's gonna not permit him to argue because he is in contempt, and the sanctions are he can't argue it, can't offer it in evidence, I think the Palm Beach condo is all but lost. We'll see next week what he has to say or if he even goes to trial. But that's a very serious sanction. The sanction really is not doing certain evidentiary submissions, but it leads to, I think, pretty inexorably bye-bye condo. And then as to the whole other package, Liman says you're in contempt also, but I will decide sanctions later. And we'll see how that plays out. Let's say Giuliani actually complies immediately with everything. Seems unlikely, but if he does, Liman still held him in contempt and will impose some kind of sanctions, but we'll see what it is. Just in terms of Giuliani's performance at the hearing, right? He actually tried to come across in his testimony. He had a grab bag of different excuses, but some of them were just completely indefensible. But this one, I don't know how technology works, or I relied on others, or, oh, really? I actually complied there, things like that. But there were a few, and those themselves, when you're at the point of contempt, probably don't cut it anyway. But there were a few where he said things like, I didn't trust the plaintiffs, to keep things private. Too bad, pal. It's a court order. You don't get to say that now. I thought that was privilege. Too bad, pal. I've ruled against you. So there were, of the many things that he has completely failed to comply with, there were at least a handful that he was basically defenseless. And for the rest, he was not as defiant as he's been in the past, but he still was at certain points defiant, and at other points kind of jocular, making jokes and stuff, and not a good way to impress the court with your seriousness. So that's him at trial, and the lawyer for Moss and Freeman were able to cross-examine him. There was one moment where they put in front of him a communication, an email, and the big interrogatories that he didn't answer, 4 and 8, called for all communications. And he said, "Oh, I didn't think an email is a communication. And anyway, that's about my work. I thought you meant personal." Scarcely credible. And, there were other moments like that on cross-examination. But it's really this whole long record of noncompliance that had Liman say, "Man, you're at the end of your rope with me, and you better come up with something good or I'm holding you in contempt." And his grab bag of different evasions didn't cut it. And that was the right move. Liman, as a good judge, having committed himself already, he would not have said, "We're holding a contempt hearing," if he weren't perfectly prepared to hold Giuliani in contempt, to finish it with a final, "Well, just one more chance, and I mean it," Rudy Giuliani would have, I think, really undermined the whole seriousness of and gravity of Giuliani's derelictions and just Lyman's own credibility. When you're a good judge and you make that, next time, unless you come up with really good stuff, you're going in jail or whatever it is, you've got to be prepared to follow through, and Liman did. So summary again, Giuliani's in a world of hurt for next week in his Palm Beach condo trial. He won't be able to make certain claims because he's been held in contempt, and it's sanctions for doing so. And then his whole record of noncompliance, he's in contempt again for, and there's going to be some hell to pay at the end. And there's one more contempt motion hanging over his head. That's for violation of a court order to stop defaming Moss and Freeman, which he continues to do. He comes out with the same malarkey and malicious malarkey, basically saying again and again when he's back with his buddies in podcast land, continuing to defame them. So he's now faces a contempt hearing in front of Judge Beryl Howe in D.C. for violating that order, which said stop defaming them, Rudy Giuliani. And his prospects there, I'd say, don't look very good either. So, man, oh man, he's, dug himself into such a deep hole. And now the real consequences are ensuing, including his one last hope of holding on to that Palm Beach condo. The trial will be next week, but I think his odds just got very remote. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.